I thought I knew my son. After all, I raised him alone, worked 3 jobs to put him through medical school, and watched him become a successful doctor. But when the security guard at my son's luxury condominium pulled me aside one afternoon, his face grave with concern, my world shattered. "Ma'am, I need to show you something on the security cameras," he said quietly. "It's about your son and, well, you need to see this yourself." What I saw on those screens made my blood run cold. The son I thought I knew, the boy I sacrificed everything for, was living a double life I never could have imagined. The security cameras revealed a truth so devastating, so completely opposite to everything he'd told me, that I stood there frozen, unable to breathe. When the security guard showed me those recordings, I realized I didn't know my son at all, and what I discovered would force me to make the hardest decision of my life. I've always believed that a mother's love can overcome anything. For 28 years, that belief sustained me through poverty, exhaustion, and loneliness. I raised my son alone after his father abandoned us when he was just 2 years old. I worked as a housekeeper in 3 different homes, scrubbing floors until my knees ached and my hands cracked and bled, also he could have a better life than mine. Every penny I earned went toward his education. While other children played after school, my son studied. While I ate rice and beans to save money, I made sure he had meat and vegetables. I wore the same threadbare coat for 15 winters so he could have new shoes. When he got accepted into medical school, I cried tears of joy and took on a 4th cleaning job to pay for his books and supplies. The day he graduated, wearing that white coat with his name embroidered on it, was the proudest moment of my life. He hugged me tight and whispered, "Mom, everything you sacrificed was worth it. I'm going to take care of you now. You'll never have to clean another house again." 5 years passed since that promise. My son became a successful cardiologist at one of the city's top hospitals. He moved into a luxury condominium in the wealthiest neighborhood, the kind of place I'd only seen from the outside when I used to work in that area. He sent me money every month, enough to cover my rent and basic expenses, and called me every Sunday without fail. But I hadn't seen him in person for 8 months. Every time I suggested visiting, he had an excuse. "I'm on call this weekend, Mom. We're renovating the apartment. It's a mess. I'm traveling to a medical conference." I understood. Doctors are busy people, and I was proud that he was so dedicated to his career. Then came that Tuesday afternoon in March when everything changed. I had just finished my shift cleaning Mrs. Rodriguez's house when I decided to surprise my son. I'd made his favorite dessert, the chocolate cake he'd loved since childhood, and thought I'd drop it off at his apartment. Maybe we could have coffee together, just for half an hour. The condominium was intimidating, all glass and marble and doormen in uniform. I felt self-conscious in my worn jacket and comfortable shoes, carrying my Tupperware container with the homemade cake. The lobby security guard, a man in his 50s named Roberto, looked at me with kind eyes. "Good afternoon, ma'am. How can I help you?" he asked. "I'm here to see my son," I said, smiling nervously. "He lives in apartment 1204. Something shifted in Roberto's expression. His eyes widened slightly, and he glanced at his colleague behind the desk. "Apartment 1204? Could you tell me your son's name?" I gave him the name, my chest swelling with pride as I added, "He's a cardiologist." Roberto's face went pale. He exchanged another look with his colleague, then said quietly, "Ma'am, could you wait here for just one moment, please?" His tone made my stomach knot with unease. He walked to the back office and returned a minute later, his expression serious. "Ma'am, I need to show you something. It's important. Would you come with me to the security room?" "Is something wrong? Is my son okay?" My heart started pounding with fear. Had there been an accident? A robbery? "Your son is fine, ma'am, but there's something you need to see. Please, trust me." If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and comment what you would do in this situation. I followed Roberto into a small room filled with monitors showing security camera feeds from various parts of the building. My hands trembled as I clutched a Tupperware container. Another security guard, younger, stood up when we entered and quietly excused himself. Roberto gestured to a chair. "Please sit down, ma'am. Just tell me what's happening," I said, my voice shaking. He took a deep breath. "Ma'am, I've worked here for 12 years. I see everything that happens in this building, and I've been watching your son for the past 3 years since he moved in. He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. 2 months ago, you came here, remember? It was raining, and you brought him some homemade soup. I nodded. I remembered that day vividly. My son had met me in the lobby, thanked me for the soup, hugged me quickly, and said he couldn't invite me up because he had colleagues over for an important meeting. I saw how he treated you that day, Roberto continued, his voice heavy with anger and sadness. He barely spoke to you. He took the container, looked around nervously like he was embarrassed, and rushed you out. I thought maybe it was just a bad day, but then I started paying attention. He turned to the computer and pulled up saved video files. I need to show you what happens in this building, ma'am. What your son doesn't want you to know. My mouth went dry. What do you mean? Roberto clicked on a video dated 3 weeks earlier. The timestamp showed a Saturday evening. The camera angle showed the building's elegant lobby and the entrance to the private garage. I watched as a sleek black sports car pulled up. My son emerged from the driver's side, wearing designer clothes I'd never seen before. He walked around and opened the passenger door. A woman stepped out. She was young, maybe in her late 20s, wearing an expensive dress and high heels. She was beautiful, with perfectly styled hair and flawless makeup. My son put his arm around her waist and kissed her cheek. They walked into the building together, laughing. Your son is married, ma'am, Roberto said gently. Her name is Camila. They've been together for years. The words hit me like a physical blow. Married? 4 years? That meant he was already with her when he graduated from medical school. When he promised to take care of me. When he looked me in the eyes and called me his hero. No, I whispered. He would have told me. He wouldn't hide something like that. Roberto's expression was full of pity. He clicked on another video. This one showed my son and Camila in the lobby with another couple, all dressed formally. They were clearly going out to dinner or a party. Camila was showing off a ring on her finger, a huge diamond that caught the light. The other woman squealed and hugged her. My son looked proud, his arm possessively around his wife's shoulders. They got married 2 years ago, Roberto explained. Big wedding. From what I heard from the other residents, destination ceremony, very exclusive. My chest felt tight. I couldn't breathe properly. 2 years ago, I remembered that time. My son had told me he was going to a month-long medical training program in another country. He'd sent me photos of himself in front of famous landmarks, always alone, always in casual clothes. Had those been from his honeymoon? Why are you showing me this? I asked, tears welling up in my eyes. Why do I need to know? Roberto's jaw tightened. Because there's more, ma'am. And you deserve to know the truth about who your son really is. He played another video. This one was from just 5 days ago. My son entered the lobby, and I appeared on the screen, walking in behind him. I was carrying bags of groceries. I remembered that day. I'd called him saying I was nearby and asked if I could bring him some fresh vegetables from the market. He'd reluctantly agreed to meet me in the lobby. I watched myself on the screen, smiling, trying to hug him. He stepped back, took the bags quickly, his body language stiff and uncomfortable. Then I heard myself on the recording asking, "Can I come up for just a few minutes? I'd love to see your apartment." Mom, I told you, it's not a good time. I have patients' files spread everywhere. It's a mess. His voice was cold, dismissive. I don't mind mess, sweetheart. I just want to spend a little time with you. I really can't today. I'll call you this weekend, okay? Thanks for the groceries. And then he did something that made my heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. As soon as I turned to leave, he took the bags and dumped them straight into the lobby trash can. All of it. The fresh vegetables I'd carefully selected. The special cheese I'd bought with my limited budget. The homemade jam I'd spent hours making. He threw it all away like garbage and walked toward the elevator without a second glance. A lump tightened in my throat so severely I thought I might suffocate. He threw it away, I whispered. Why would he do that? I'm sorry, ma'am, Roberto said quietly, but that's not the worst of it. Leave me in the comments. Have you been through something similar? He showed me another video from 2 months earlier. This time, the camera captured the hallway outside apartment 1204. The audio was clear. I could hear voices from inside the apartment. My son and his wife were having a conversation, and the door must have been slightly ajar because every word was audible. Your mother came again today? Camila's voice was sharp with irritation. I know, I know. I got rid of her as quickly as I could. My son's voice. My son, talking about me like I was a pest to be exterminated. This has to stop. I'm tired of you sneaking around, pretending she doesn't exist. Either tell her about us or cut her off completely. I can't just cut her off, Camila. She'd cause a scene. A scene? Your mother is a housekeeper. What kind of scene could she possibly cause? You're embarrassed of her. Just admit it. There was a pause. My hands trembled with contained rage as I waited for my son to defend me, to tell his wife she was wrong. Of course I'm embarrassed, he said finally. Look at her. She shows up here in those awful clothes, with her rough hands and her simple way of talking. My colleagues, the other residents, they see her and they wonder how a successful cardiologist could have come from that. It's humiliating. I felt the floor opening beneath my feet. The room spun. Roberto grabbed my arm to steady me. I spent my entire life trying to escape that poverty, my son continued. Medical school was my ticket out. And now I'm here. I have everything I wanted. A beautiful wife from a good family, a respected career, this apartment, the right social circle. I can't let her drag me back down. So what do you do? Keep sending her money and hoping she stays away? Camila asked. Exactly. I sent her enough to keep her comfortable and out of my life. It's a small price to pay for my peace of mind. Eventually, she'll get the message. What about when we have children? Are you going to hide them from their grandmother? My son laughed. Actually laughed. Obviously. Can you imagine bringing our kids to visit her in that tiny apartment in that terrible neighborhood? No way. They'll grow up knowing my side of the family only. We'll tell them my mother died or something. I couldn't watch anymore. I covered my face with my hands and sobbed. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from the very core of my being. Roberto turned off the video and placed a box of tissues on the desk beside me. I'm so sorry, ma'am, he said, his own voice thick with emotion. I debated for weeks whether to show you this, but I have a mother too, and if my son ever treated her this way, I'd want someone to tell her the truth. I cried for what felt like hours but was probably only 10 minutes. When I finally looked up, my face was swollen and my eyes burned. Why is he like this? I asked. I gave him everything. I sacrificed everything. Some people, when they rise up, they forget where they came from, Roberto said. They forget the people who lifted them up. It's not your fault, ma'am. You did nothing wrong. You were a good mother. He's the one who failed as a son. I wiped my eyes and took a shaky breath. Is there more? Roberto hesitated. There's one more thing. From last week. He showed me a video of my son entering the building with a group of people, all dressed in expensive suits and dresses. They were clearly coming from some formal event. One of the men was asking my son about his background. So you're from this city? What did your parents do? My son didn't miss a beat. My father was a professor at the university. My mother was a teacher. They both passed away when I was in medical school, unfortunately. Car accident. He killed me. In his version of his life, I was dead. Erased. A convenient fiction that made his story cleaner, more palatable for his wealthy friends. Something inside me shifted. The grief and heartbreak began to transform into something harder, colder. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, but the icy, calculated fury of someone who has finally seen the truth and will not tolerate it any longer. Roberto, I said, my voice steady now. I need copies of these videos. Can you do that for me? He looked surprised. Of course, ma'am. I can put them on a USB drive for you. But what are you going to do? I don't know yet, I admitted. But I'm not going to let him get away with this. I'm not going to disappear quietly like he wants me to. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories like this. Roberto copied the videos onto a USB drive and handed it to me. If you need anything else, any other footage, you just let me know. I'm on your side, ma'am. I thanked him and left the building, my legs feeling shaky. I sat on a bench outside, the Tupperware container with the chocolate cake still in my lap. I looked at it, this symbol of a mother's love, and felt sick. I walked to a nearby trash can and threw it away, just like my son had done with my groceries. For 3 days, I didn't leave my apartment. I called in sick to my cleaning jobs, something I'd never done in 20 years of work. I replayed those videos on my laptop over and over, each viewing making me angrier, more determined. I thought about everything I'd given up for him. The dreams I'd abandoned, the relationships I'd sacrificed, the decades of my life spent in service of his success. And this was my reward, to be hidden away, lied about, erased. On the fourth day, I got up, showered, and made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him with tears and accusations. That's what he expected from me, the simple, emotional housekeeper who could be easily dismissed. Instead, I was going to do something he'd never expect. I was going to use my brain and the knowledge I'd accumulated from 3 decades of working in wealthy households. I called Mrs. Chen, one of the women whose house I cleaned. She was a lawyer, a sharp, successful woman who'd always treated me with respect. When I asked if I could speak with her privately about a family legal matter, she invited me to her home office that same afternoon. I showed her the videos. Her expression went from curious to horrified to furious as she watched. When I explained the full situation, how my son had hidden his marriage, how he was erasing me from his life, how he'd lied about my death, she sat back in her chair and shook her head. "This is unconscionable," she said, "but I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. What do you want to accomplish here? Revenge? Reconciliation? Justice?" I thought about it carefully. I want him to face consequences for his choices. I want him to understand that actions have repercussions. And I want to make sure he never treats anyone else the way he's treated me. Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. "Okay, I have an idea, but it's going to require courage on your part. Are you willing to do something that might permanently damage your relationship with your son?" I looked her straight in the eye. My relationship with my son ended the day he decided to erase me from his life. Whatever happens now is just making it official. Over the next 2 weeks, Mrs. Chen and I crafted a plan. She made some calls, used some connections, and gathered some information about my son's professional life. What we discovered made my blood boil even hotter. My son wasn't just hiding me from his social circle. He'd actively built his entire professional reputation on a lie. In his bio on the hospital website, he described growing up in a family of educators who instilled in him a love of learning and service. He'd given interviews to medical journals where he talked about his parents' sacrifice to put him through school, painting a picture of a middle-class upbringing full of intellectual enrichment and stability. He'd even established a small scholarship fund at his medical school, named in honor of his late parents, that gave money to underprivileged students. The irony was sickening. He was using the fiction of my death to make himself look generous and humble. "He's created a false narrative," Mrs. Chen explained, "and he's benefited professionally from that narrative. The hospital hired him partly because his backstory made him seem relatable and grounded. His patients trust him because they think he understands struggle. But it's all a lie. So what do we do?" I asked. "We expose the truth," she said simply, "but we do it strategically, in a way that gives you power and him consequences. Give it a thumbs up if you think I did the right thing." Mrs. Chen helped me write a letter. It was detailed, factual, and devastating. It outlined the truth of my son's upbringing, included selected screenshots from the security videos showing him throwing away my gifts and lying to his friends, and explained how he'd built his professional reputation on a fabricated story about his deceased parents. But we didn't send it yet. First, we needed to give my son a chance to make things right. Mrs. Chen called it good faith negotiation, but I knew what it really was. A test to see if there was any decency left in him. I called my son on a Sunday as usual. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice distracted. "Hey, Mom, can't talk long. I'm about to head into a hospital board meeting." "A board meeting on Sunday?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Yeah, we've got some budget issues to sort out." "What's up?" "I need to see you. In person. It's important." There was a pause. "Mom, I told you. I'm really busy right now." "Can it wait?" "No, it can't. Tomorrow. You can choose the time and place, but we need to talk face to face." Another pause, longer this time. "Is something wrong? Are you sick?" For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he did care, even a little. "I'm not sick, but this is serious. Please," he sighed, a sound full of irritation. "Fine, there's a coffee shop 2 blocks from the hospital. Meet me there tomorrow at 2 o'clock. "But I only have 30 minutes. "I'll be there," I said, and hung up before he could change his mind. The next afternoon, I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early. I dressed carefully, not in my usual worn clothes, but in a simple, dignified dress that Mrs. Chen had helped me pick out. I looked respectable, put together. I wanted my son to see me as I truly was, not the embarrassment he'd created in his mind, but a woman who had worked hard, lived honorably, and deserved respect. He arrived exactly at 2 o'clock, rushed and impatient. He kissed my cheek quickly and sat down across from me, already checking his phone. "Okay, Mom. What's this about?" I placed a folder on the table between us. "I need you to look at something." He glanced at the folder with annoyance. "What is it?" "Open it." With an exaggerated sigh, he opened the folder. Inside were printed screenshots from the security videos. Him throwing away my groceries. Him with his wife. A transcript of the conversation where he'd told Camila he was embarrassed of me. His professional bio from the hospital website, with the lies about his late parents highlighted. I watched the color drain from his face. His hands started to shake slightly. He looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw real emotion in his eyes. "Fear. Where did you get these?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "That doesn't matter. What matters is that I have them, and I know the truth about what you've been doing, how you've been living." He closed the folder quickly, looking around the coffee shop to make sure no one was watching. "Mom, listen. I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you've been hiding me like I'm something shameful. How you told your wife and your friends that I'm dead. How you built your entire professional reputation on lies about your background." "It's not that simple," he said, his voice desperate now. "You don't understand the pressure, the expectations in my field. People have certain ideas about what a successful doctor should be, where they should come from." I felt my face burning with shame and anger. "So you erased me. You erased 28 years of sacrifice and love because it didn't fit your image." "I didn't erase you. I send you money every month. I make sure you're taken care of. You pay me to stay away," I said coldly, "like I'm a problem to be managed, not your mother." He ran his hands through his hair, looking cornered. "What do you want? Money?" "I can increase what I send you. I can buy you a better apartment." The fact that he thought this was about money showed how little he understood. "I don't want your money. I never wanted your money. I wanted my son. I wanted the boy I raised to be a good man, an honest man. But he's gone, isn't he? You killed him when you decided to become this person." "Stop being so dramatic," he snapped, some of his old arrogance returning. "So I didn't tell people about you. So what? It's not like I abandoned you. I still support you financially." "You told people I was dead," I said, my voice shaking. "You literally erased my existence. And worse, you used the fiction of my sacrifice to make yourself look good, to get ahead in your career. You profited from pretending to honor me while simultaneously hiding me away." He was silent, his jaw working as he tried to formulate a response. I pulled out another document from my bag and placed it on the table. "This is a letter. It details everything. Your real background, how you actually got through medical school, the truth about your late parents. It includes some of those videos and screenshots. If I send this letter to your hospital administration, to the medical board, to the newspapers, your reputation will be destroyed. That scholarship you set up in honor of your late parents, people will see it for the self-serving lie it is." His eyes widened with panic. "You wouldn't I?" I leaned forward. "You've spent 3 years systematically removing me from your life. Why shouldn't I remove the false version of me that you've been using for your benefit? Would you do the same in my place?" "Mom, please." Now he was begging, his professional composure completely shattered. "If you send that, you'll ruin everything I've worked for." "Everything you worked for?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Everything I worked for. Every floor I scrubbed, every toilet I cleaned, every night I cried myself to sleep because I was so exhausted I couldn't move. That's what paid for your success, not your work. Mine." He looked like he might cry. Part of me wanted to comfort him, the old maternal instinct kicking in, but I pushed it down. This was too important. "I'll give you a choice," I said. "You can make things right, or I can send this letter." "What do you want me to do?" he asked desperately. "First, you're going to tell your wife the truth. All of it. About how you got through school, about me being alive, about everything. Then, you're going to update your professional bio to reflect the truth. You're going to acknowledge publicly who I am and what I did for you. And you're going to start treating me like your mother, not like a dirty secret. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You want me to tell everyone my mother is a housekeeper? Do you know what that will do to me professionally? I want you to tell everyone the truth, I corrected. And if the truth damages you professionally, then maybe you shouldn't have built your career on lies. This is blackmail, he said, anger replacing the fear. No, this is consequences, I replied calmly. You made choices. You lied. You hid. You used a false narrative for personal gain. Now you get to choose, face the consequences publicly and completely, or face them privately by making things right. He sat back in his chair, his face a mixture of anger, fear, and something that might have been shame. And if I do what you want, you'll destroy those videos and the letter? If you do what I want, and if you prove over time that you're genuine about changing, then yes. But if you go back to hiding me, if you slip back into your lies, then I'll send everything. And I'll make sure every detail of your deception becomes public knowledge. He was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly working through his options. Finally, he said, I need time to think about this. You have 24 hours, I said, standing up. Mrs. Chen, my lawyer, will be waiting for your call. You can reach her at this number. I handed him her business card. After 24 hours, the letter goes out to everyone on our list. The hospital, the medical board, the local newspapers, your medical school alumni association, all of it. I left the coffee shop without looking back. My legs felt weak, but I kept walking until I reached a bus stop. Then I sat down on the bench and let out a long, shaky breath. I'd done it. I'd stood up to him. And whether he chose to make things right or let it all burn down, at least I'd taken back my power. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I barely slept. I kept checking my phone, expecting a call from Mrs. Chen, but there was nothing. As the deadline approached, I felt increasingly certain that my son would call my bluff, that he'd convince himself I wouldn't actually go through with it. But at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, exactly 23 hours after I'd given him the ultimatum, Mrs. Chen called me. He caved, she said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. He wants to negotiate the terms, but he's agreed to the core demands. He'll tell his wife, he'll update his bio, and he'll acknowledge you publicly. I felt tears streaming down my face, but this time they were tears of relief and something like vindication. Really? Really? He's terrified of that letter going public. He knows it would end his career. So he's choosing the lesser of two evils from his perspective, which is the right thing from an objective perspective. Over the next week, things moved quickly. My son called me, his voice stiff and formal, and asked to meet with me and his wife. I agreed, and Mrs. Chen came with me as my representative. The meeting took place in my son's apartment, the first time I'd ever been allowed inside. It was beautiful, spacious, decorated in expensive modern furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. Camila was there, looking uncomfortable and angry. My son looked like he hadn't slept in days. Mom, this is Camila. Camila, this is my mother. His voice was flat, defeated. Camila gave me a tight smile. Nice to meet you, she said, but her eyes said something different. We all sat down in the uncomfortable living room. Mrs. Chen pulled out a document she'd prepared, essentially a contract outlining what my son had agreed to do and what would happen if he failed to follow through. This is a legally binding agreement, Mrs. Chen explained. You'll update your professional bio within 1 week to accurately reflect your background. You'll issue a public statement acknowledging that your previous bio contained inaccuracies. You'll meet with your mother at least once a month in person for at least 2 hours. You'll invite her to family events and introduce her honestly to your colleagues and friends. And you'll issue a public apology for the scholarship fund's deceptive origin story and either rename it or shut it down. My son flinched at each item on the list. Camila looked like she wanted to object but kept quiet. And if he doesn't comply? Camila asked coldly. Then all the documentation we have, including the security videos and the evidence of his deceptive professional bio, gets released publicly, Mrs. Chen said simply. We're being generous by giving him a chance to correct his mistakes privately. This is insane, Camila muttered. You're blackmailing him. I'm giving him a chance to be an honest person, I said, speaking directly to her for the first time. Something he stopped being a long time ago. My son signed the agreement. His hand shook as he wrote his name, and I felt a complex mix of emotions. Victory, yes, but also sadness for what we'd lost, for the relationship we'd never get back. The following weeks were surreal. My son updated his hospital bio. The new version was honest, almost brutally so. It talked about being raised by a single mother who worked as a housekeeper, about the sacrifices she'd made, about rising from poverty through education. Some of his colleagues reached out to him, apparently impressed by his honesty and humility. The irony wasn't lost on me. He issued a statement about the scholarship fund, explaining that he'd previously honored his late parents but wanted to now honor his very much alive mother by renaming it in her honor. The hospital's PR department spun it as a touching story of reconciliation and honesty. My son received praise for his courage in being transparent about his background. It made me sick, honestly. He was being rewarded for finally telling the truth after years of lies. But I suppose that's how the world works sometimes. Our first mandated monthly meeting was awkward. He took me to dinner at a restaurant, and we sat across from each other in painful silence for long stretches. He asked about my work, his tone polite but distant, like he was making small talk with a stranger. I asked about his patients, trying to find some connection to the boy I'd raised. We were two people going through the motions, pretending at a relationship that had been broken beyond repair. But something unexpected happened during our third monthly meeting. We were having coffee, another stiff, awkward encounter, when he suddenly said, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how I used your sacrifice for my benefit while hiding you away." I looked up, surprised. This was the first time he'd brought up the situation directly. "And?" I prompted. "And you were right," he said quietly. "I was a coward. I was so desperate to fit into this world, to be accepted by the right people, that I convinced myself you were a liability instead of the reason I got here at all." I felt my heart soften slightly, against my better judgment. "Why did you do it?" I asked. "When did I become something to be ashamed of?" He stared into his coffee cup. "It started in medical school. Everyone around me came from money, from educated families. They'd talk about their parents' dinner parties, their family vacation homes, their connections. And when they asked about my family, I felt this shame, this sense that I didn't belong. So I started embellishing. Little lies at first, then bigger ones. And after a while, the lies felt more real than the truth. "But I was proud of you," I said, my voice breaking. "I was never ashamed of you. Why couldn't you feel the same way about me?" He looked up, and for the first time in years, I saw real remorse in his eyes. "Because I was ashamed of myself, for wanting more than what we had, for being embarrassed of where I came from. And it was easier to hide you than to face that shame." "So what now?" I asked. "Are you doing all this just because you're afraid of the letter, or because you actually want to change?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, it started as fear, pure terror about my career being destroyed. But the more I've been forced to face the truth, the more I realize how much I lost when I chose to hide you. I lost my integrity. I lost the person I was supposed to be. And I lost the only person who ever loved me unconditionally." Tears welled up in my eyes. "You hurt me more than anyone else ever could. You made me feel like I wasn't good enough, like everything I did for you meant nothing." "I know," he said, his own eyes glistening. "And I don't know if you can ever forgive me. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I want to try. Not because of the contract or the threat, but because I want my mother back." "Do you think I overreacted?" I wish I could say that this moment fixed everything, that we hugged and cried and went back to being close. But real life doesn't work like that. The damage was too deep, the betrayal too complete. But it was a start, a tiny, fragile beginning of something that might, over many years, grow into a real relationship again. In the months that followed, my son made genuine efforts to include me in his life. He introduced me to his colleagues at a hospital charity event, clearly uncomfortable but doing it anyway. When I met his co-workers, some of them told me how Janitor Novamintek and Chanchuri admired my son's honesty about his background, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing bitterly at the irony. Camila remained cold and distant, barely tolerating my presence at family dinners. I understood her perspective. in a way. I'd forced my way back into their lives through what she saw as manipulation. But I also didn't particularly care about her opinion. She'd been complicit in my son's deception, encouraging him to keep me hidden. Whatever relationship we might have in the future would have to be earned on both sides. The real turning point came 6 months after our confrontation. My son called me on a Tuesday evening, outside of our scheduled monthly meeting. That alone was unusual enough to make my heart race with worry. "Mom, can you come to the apartment tomorrow? There's something Camila and I need to tell you." My stomach dropped. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. Just, please come." The next day, I arrived at their apartment with Mrs. Chan, who I'd called as a precaution. I still didn't fully trust my son, and I wanted a witness to whatever this was about. But when Camila opened the door, her expression was softer than I'd ever seen it. Almost nervous. "Please, come in," she said quietly. "Would you like some tea?" We sat in the living room, the same room where we'd signed the contract 6 months earlier. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. My son and Camila sat close together on the couch, their hands intertwined. They both looked anxious but also excited. "Mom," my son began, his voice unsteady. "We have news. Camila is pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." The world seemed to stop. I stared at them, 1,000 emotions flooding through me at once. Joy, fear, anger, hope. I thought about what my son had said on that security video, how he'd planned to tell his children I was dead, to keep them away from me in my terrible neighborhood. "Congratulations," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Camila spoke up then, her voice tentative. "We want you to be part of the baby's life. A real part. Not hidden away or lied about. We want our child to know their grandmother." I looked at my son, searching his face for any sign of deception or reluctance. "Is this what you want? Really want? Or is this just part of the contract?" He shook his head firmly. "The contract expires in 6 months anyway. We're not telling you this because we have to. We're telling you because these past few months, as much as I've hated facing what I did, have made me realize what's important. And I don't want to raise my child with the same lies I've been living." Tears streamed down my face. Mrs. Chen quietly handed me a tissue. "I need you to promise me something," I said, my voice shaking. "Promise me you'll never be ashamed of me in front of your child. Promise me you'll tell them the truth about how you grew up, about what I did for you. Not to make yourself look bad, but because they deserve to know that love sometimes means sacrifice." "I promise," he said, and this time, I believed him. Camila wiped her own eyes. "I owe you an apology too," she said quietly. "I encouraged him to keep you away. I thought I was protecting our social standing, our image. But I was wrong. A family built on lies isn't a family at all. I'm sorry." It wasn't a perfect apology, and part of me suspected it came more from pregnancy hormones and the reality of impending motherhood than genuine remorse. But it was something. Another small step toward healing. Over the next several months, something unexpected happened. As Camila's pregnancy progressed, she started calling me more often. At first, it was practical questions about babies and child rearing. But gradually, the calls became longer, more personal. She told me about her own mother, who had died when she was young, and how she'd always missed having that maternal guidance. She asked about my experiences raising my son alone, about how I'd managed to be both mother and father. And slowly, carefully, I began to care about her. Not in the way I'd dreamed of loving a daughter-in-law when my son was young, but in a real, complicated, hard-won way. My son, too, continued to change. He started asking about my childhood, about his grandparents whom he'd barely known before they died. He asked about the early years when I was struggling to raise him alone, details he'd never wanted to hear before. He listened, really listened, to the stories of sacrifice he'd spent years trying to forget. One evening, as we sat together in my small apartment, he'd started coming to visit me in my space instead of always meeting in neutral locations. He looked around at the worn furniture and faded curtains and said, "I used to be so ashamed of this place. But you made this a home. You made it warm and safe and full of love. And I was too busy being embarrassed to appreciate that." "You were young," I said, trying to offer some grace. "Young people want to fit in to be accepted." I wasn't that young, he countered. I was old enough to know better. Old enough to know that character matters more than appearances. He paused, then added, I'm grateful you forced me to face the truth. If you hadn't, I would have spent my whole life hiding behind lies, teaching my children to value the wrong things. Comment if you know someone like this. The day my grandson was born was one of the most emotional days of my life. I held that tiny baby in my arms, looked at his perfect face, and felt a complicated tangle of joy and grief. Joy for this new life, this fresh start. Grief for all the years I'd lost with my son, for the relationship that had been broken and could never be fully repaired. But as I watched my son hold his baby, as I saw the wonder and fear and overwhelming love in his eyes, I felt something shift. Maybe we couldn't get back what we'd lost. Maybe the mother-son relationship I'd dreamed of was gone forever. But we could build something new, something honest and real, even if it was imperfect. 3 months after my grandson was born, my son did something that completely surprised me. He arranged a small gathering at his apartment and invited some of his closest colleagues and friends. When everyone was assembled, he stood up and asked for their attention. I want to introduce you all to someone very important, he said, his voice steady. This is my mother. Some of you have met her before, but I want you to really know her. She raised me alone after my father left. She worked as a housekeeper in 3 different homes, sometimes 4, to pay for my education. She sacrificed everything, her comfort, her health, her own dreams so that I could become a doctor. He paused, his voice growing thicker with emotion. For years, I was ashamed of her. I hid her from my life because I was a coward who cared more about appearances than integrity. I even told some of you that my parents had died. That was a lie, and I'm deeply ashamed of that lie. The room was silent. People shifted uncomfortably. Camila sat beside me, holding my hand. I'm telling you this now because I don't want to live with lies anymore, my son continued. And because my son deserves to grow up knowing his grandmother, knowing where he really comes from. My mother taught me everything important I know, even though I spent years pretending I'd learned it somewhere else. She taught me about hard work, perseverance, and unconditional love, and I'm done hiding that. Several people came up to me afterward, telling me how moved they were by my son's honesty, how much they respected my sacrifice. It was overwhelming and awkward and uncomfortable, but it was also healing. My son had finally, publicly, acknowledged the truth. Not because he was forced to, but because he'd chosen to. That night, after everyone had left, I helped Camila clean up while my son put the baby to bed. As we worked side by side in the kitchen, she said quietly, "Thank you." I looked at her, surprised. For what? For not giving up on him. For forcing him to be better. He's a better man now than he was a year ago. A better husband. And he'll be a better father because of what she did. I had to blink back tears. I just wanted my son back. You got him, she said simply. Not the version you'd lost, but maybe a better version. One who's learned from his mistakes. Now, nearly a year after that confrontation in the coffee shop, my life looks completely different. I still work as a housekeeper. I love my work and the families I work for, but I'm no longer defined by being the secret shame of a successful doctor. I'm a grandmother. I'm respected and acknowledged. I have my dignity back. My relationship with my son will never be what it was when he was young, when he looked at me with pure adoration and called me his hero. That innocence is gone, shattered by his betrayal and my necessary response. But we've built something new, something harder earned and more honest. We have dinner together once a week now, not because a contract requires it, but because he wants to. I watch my grandson twice a week while they work. Camila and I have developed our own relationship, tentative but genuine. We're learning to be family, messy and complicated as that is. Sometimes late at night, I think about that day in the security room when Roberto showed me those videos. Part of me wishes I'd never seen them, that I'd continued living in ignorant bliss, believing my son was simply busy with his important career. But most of me knows that the truth, painful as it was, set us both free. Free from the lies that were poisoning his life and erasing mine. Roberto still works at the condominium. When I visit, he always greets me warmly, and there's a mutual understanding between us. He saw me at my lowest moment and chose to help rather than look away. I'll always be grateful for that. Mrs. Chen has become a friend. We have lunch once a month, and she checks in to make sure my son is keeping his promises. Trust, but verify, she always says with a wink. The contract may have expired, but she's still watching, still protective of me. It's nice to have someone in my corner. The hardest part of this entire experience wasn't the confrontation or the public revelation or even the initial pain of discovering my son's betrayal. The hardest part has been forgiving him. Not the performative forgiveness that makes everyone comfortable, but the deep, genuine forgiveness that allows us to move forward. Some days, I look at him holding his son, and I feel such anger at what he did, at the years he stole from us. Other days, I see him teaching his boy to be kind to everyone, regardless of their job or social class, and I feel hope. He's trying to be better, to raise his child without the shame and deception that corrupted his own heart. Is it enough? I don't know. Maybe that's not the right question. Maybe the right question is, can broken things be remade into something new and worthwhile? And to that, I'd say yes. Not perfectly restored, but rebuilt with honesty as the foundation this time. My grandson will grow up knowing who I am. He'll hear stories about his father's childhood, about the tiny apartment and the sacrifices and the love that held everything together. He'll understand that dignity doesn't come from money or status, but from how you treat people and whether you live honestly. And maybe, just maybe, that will be my real legacy. Not the successful doctor I raised, but the values I instilled deeply enough that they survived even when my son tried to bury them. Values that are now being passed to another generation, this time without the shame. I think about that woman I was a year ago, standing in the security room, watching my world crumble. I wish I could tell her that she's stronger than she knows, that the pain she's feeling will transform into power, that standing up for herself will change everything.